Greetings, fellow humans. Welcome to the discussion table. My name is Sean on the Milwaukee, Wisconsin side of the table. On the Columbus, Ohio side, we've got Alex Dollenmayer. Alex, who are we and what are we doing here?
We are one half of an indie pop band called Oh Geeez, Not Again, and along with that, we have a lot of opinions on new albums in general, and we figured it's finally time to share our opinions with the world, and what better way to start than with this Billie Eilish album.
Yeah, something that a lot of people probably have opinions on.
Yes,
so
yes.
I'm excited to add ours to the discussion here. Right. Now, when you were going into this album, did you have expectations for it? Was there something that you were looking for this record to deliver for you?
It's interesting because I'm so used to artists putting out like 3, 4, even 5 singles beforehand. So to not have that was kind of nice. Like we had little snippets and that sort of thing, but I tried not to judge too much based off that. But with Billie Eilish, I mean, I got into her like most people around When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go?
Sure.
And I love that album. But then with Happier Than Ever, I liked it, didn't love it. It was a little bit of a step down for me personally. I just didn't find myself coming back to it as a whole as much. I was honestly just looking for something, I wouldn't even say akin to that first album, but just something fresh. You know, I don't know if I ever could have expected this album. I will say that.
Sure.
Without spoiling too much, I'm very happy with the direction that she and Phineas took.
So at this point, how many times have you heard this new record?
I'm up to 5 times now. So I went to the AMC listening event on Thursday. That was just a wild experience because there were 300 people there, 300 plus maybe, and it was obviously in Dolby Atmos, and I've never gotten to hear an album like that before.
Sure.
And I think that really helped me appreciate it, and I feel like I naturally have a little bit of bias towards it because when I'm hearing these songs, I hear the crowd reactions and that sort of thing. But as I've continued to replay it, I mean, it still hits just as much for me. So I'm curious to get your perspective, though, with Billie, what your experience has been like with her music just throughout the years. I don't know how much I know about how you feel about each album.
What's interesting for me is that I remember, so you say you got into Billie right about the time that When We All Fall Asleep came out.
Yeah.
And that was when I really first started really paying attention to her. But I remember, I can't even remember what video it was I was watching, but I remember on like January 2017, I was watching a video about like artists to watch in the coming year. And the first one on this video was, you gotta watch for Billie Eilish. And at that point, I was like, Billie Eilish. And, you know, looking her up, and at that point, she had only put out a couple of songs. Like, that was like Ocean Eyes, and that was pretty much it at that point. Even the EP hadn't come out yet. And I was like, really? This girl? We think this girl's going to be a star? It didn't make sense to me at the time. And then a year later, when she starts showing up on the Hot 100, I was like, oh, I guess this is happening now. And by the end of 2018, you could see like the wave was coming. Like this was the next phenomenon. And it was cool to watch that happen kind of in real time, this ascent of this new superstar. And by the time When We All Fall Asleep came out, like it was undeniable, and it was just cool to be a part of that movement, of that ascension. I really enjoyed that record, and I think I would agree with you on Happier Than Ever that it felt more scattershot. And it sounds like from the interviews that Billie did before this record came out that she feels very much the same way about it, that she really didn't know what she was going for. She said she spent a lot of time alone because of the pandemic and just due to feeling like she couldn't go outside due to her celebrity and not being able to kind of interact with people in the same way. And that really inspired this Happier Than Ever. And she wanted to get back with this one to 2019 version of her. And I thought that was a really interesting way to put it, because I feel like there's a lot of music out right now that is dealing with the after effects of the pandemic. And I think this one definitely does as well. So I was, when I first heard some of the previews, I was like, oh, it's more pop. Like it's got more of a traditional pop feel to it. That ended up not being the case at all with this record. But it was interesting to have that expectation going in of like, oh, this could be more of a pop album. This could be something less dark, less experimental, and it ended up being very experimental. So when you listen to the record, let's start with the first track. I want to get into this album because we've both heard it a couple times, and I think we both have quite a few thoughts on it. Starting off the record with Skinny, track 1.
People say I look happy just because I got skinny.
When you first heard this was the first introduction to the record. What were your thoughts on it?
So to me, it felt like a spiritual successor to Getting Older off of Happier Than Ever. That was like my first thought. Because both of those albums start pretty soft. You know, it's not like starting with Bad Guy essentially, and it's just right out the gate. And I prefer that because I feel like Skinny is probably the most reminiscent of what people would expect from her.
Sure.
I think that if you heard the song from the Barbie soundtrack and then went right to Skinny, you're like, oh yeah, this is what she does. You know, she has the soft vocals and sort of this quiet instrumentation. And then you obviously have the strings in there too. So it didn't necessarily catch me off guard, but I do think it is a great way to open the record. I think that outro especially adds a ton to it. That immediately set it apart for me. You know, she could have easily cut the song at 2 minutes or something and moved on to the pop thing. But, you know, we spend 45 seconds on this string arrangement, which is, I think, could also work as an outro to the album, and it does sort of end up coming back around. No, I love this song. Lyrically, I think it's one of her best, one of her most vulnerable. Again, was I shocked by it? No, but I was very pleased with this intro.
You mentioned the lyrics being of note. One line that stuck out to me is, "The old me is still me, and maybe she's the real me." And I thought that was a really interesting phrase. And it goes back to what she was talking about in those interviews about wanting to get back to an earlier version, an earlier perspective that she had. And I think the song being called Skinny is interesting because she only says that once in the song, and it's used in kind of a negative way, with her saying that, oh, now that I've quote unquote gotten skinny, people say, oh, you must be so happy. Like now that like all they see is the outward appearance and not what's beneath. And that's what this record is all about, really, is her faith trying to figure out, who am I underneath? So I think to call attention to that in the title of the song itself is really interesting.
Yeah, and I think it's a line on this song, the bird in a cage, when she gets off stage.
Yes.
And I think that also is a great way to sum up the record, just because, like you said, I think people assume, you know, she's happier because of her appearance, that sort of thing. But, you know, her making it very clear that that's maybe not the case, that as soon as she steps off that stage, now it's time to face, you know, all of
herself,
her personal
really,
demons and relationships. And
you mentioned the strings, too. That was something that I read about, too. That's the Ataka String Quartet. They did all these string arrangements on this record, and they pop up in a lot of key places and certainly add a lot to that. The other thing I noticed about this one right away is that, as always, her vocals are just incredible. She has one of, if not the best control of any vocalist in pop music, and especially at the end of those phrases, like it kind of goes down at the end of the phrase, and then on the final phrase of a section, like 21 took a lifetime, when it goes up like that, I wasn't expecting that, and that was, as a songwriter, that was something that really caught my ear immediately, was playing with that melody and where it ends up going, and how she's just able to go from this very quiet, hushed, completely in control delivery to something more showy than I think we're used to seeing from her. And that's something else I noticed about this record as a whole, is that she's really showing off her vocal ability, I think, more than ever before. And not that she, you know, held back before. What she did was always very complex, but this feels specifically designed to show off her range and her ability as a singer.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny when I was taking notes for this, the amount of times I wrote I love the vocals or like this specific part and that sort of thing. It almost seems like a no-brainer at this point.
Right.
But like you said, throughout the whole album, she's not, you know, she's sometimes been classified as just like, oh, the breathy singer that like she doesn't belt or she doesn't anything like that. This album, she, you know, she's belting on some of this stuff and it's like showing her full range. And I think without even knowing it, that's something that I really wanted. I wanted something that felt a little more dynamic, and that's definitely what we got.
Anything else we want to say about the opener here?
I mean, I feel like it segues into the next song because that transition, when I was, again, in that AMC listening event, the reaction to that, and when people realized that it was the song that they had heard, you know, snippets of, it was just wild. And it's one of the best transitions I've heard on like a pop album in a while. There's a lot of different places like that on this album.
Yeah, I was going to say all of these songs are designed to transition into each other seamlessly. Which gets back to the point that I think this is something we should mention, is that one of the reasons that she said she didn't want a single from this record was because she wanted it to be heard in its entirety first.
Right.
For it to be a front-to-back listening experience the first time you hear it. And I think she certainly kind of designed it that way with all of these transitions, and we'll talk more about that, I think, later as we get into the record. But to transition then into the song that is definitely the single from the record, Lunge. Thoughts on this one?
I could eat that girl for lunch as she dances on my tongue. Tastes like she might be the one.
I love it. I knew I'd love it. It's so much fun. I think that there's no way this isn't a hit.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think you can really only take this song and maybe like one or two others that we'll get to as those singles.
Yes.
I really don't see anything else being on the radio, unless maybe they're cut down significantly or something like that. But it's funny. This is maybe an odd comparison, but I think that it's most reminiscent to me of This Is Why from Paramore, just that album. There's a couple reasons why I think that. The sound of the drums, I'm going to harp on this for a while throughout the album.
You are the drummer, so you can feel free to harp on this as all you want.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so I mean, as the drummer, I feel like I have so many different spots to point this out, but the drums have this dead sound to them, but they're super punchy. And when you combine that with the bass line, like it's pretty funky, and it's easily the biggest banger on the album. And then there's that little section towards the end where those synths come in, and it's like this thing is.
I have a lot to say. I have a lot to say about that part. So I'm, for those watching, I am the songwriter and producer of our band, and this one in particular, I love a good pop song. I am obsessed with songs like this, and in fact, whenever I try to listen to this record, I end up just getting stuck on this song. Like, I just keep looping it over and over and over because it is so fun and so catchy and so detailed. Like, that was something I was talking about with somebody when I was, before I heard the record, and I was saying that I thought it might be a more pop record, and she said to me, like, yeah, but, you know, Billy and Phineas, they're so talented, I wouldn't want to see them just go make pop music. And I was like, that's not an either-or thing. Like, this song is hugely detailed in its production. And there's so many. I mean, I have this running list of things I love about it. Like, I love how the guitars aren't, like, completely quantized on the beat. When I first heard it, I was like, oh, it's not as slick as I was hoping it would be. But then I realized, like, that really gives it so much character. It feels live. It feels like they're playing this, like, live in the studio. I love the meandering piano line that comes in after the second chorus. It just adds this great contrast. There's so much contrast in this song between the different sections. They're little ear candy that Phineas slides in there, like after when she says, she's the headlights, I'm the deer. And then there's a little tire squeal that, like, goes from left to right. It's so cute, and it's just like, I appreciate that, Phineas. Thanks for that, Phineas. And then when that synth comes in at the end, it's like this is something else she talked about in that interview, was this record being inspired by her going out, to parties for the first time in a long time, and DJing being something that she used to be into as a kid and really, really passionate about. And I mean, basically she did the club remix of her own song at the end. And I think that's so perfect. Like in this age where like everyone's speeding up or slowing down stuff or altering it in a certain way, you just do that to your own song. To have that as part of the song itself, and that's just such a brilliant move. When that bass kicked in at the end, I was losing my mind. I was like, oh my gosh, she did it! She won pop music in 2024. It's over. This is it. This is it. And there's also these little touches, like there's like micro panning in her vocals, like right before the section at the end, and there's just for like a half second they'll go to the right or go to the left, and it's just little things like that where you're just like, sure, it's kind of a basic pop song, but there's so much going on, and it's so cool to listen to it in that way and hear all the little tricks that they snuck in there. I love it. I absolutely love it. And I also think it's so funny that, like, obviously this was written to be the single, and yet it's also like the most overtly sexual thing she's put out too. They're just like, Billie, we can't put this on the radio. Like, what are you talking about? We can't. You're gonna eat that girl for lunch. We can't say that on the radio. But she's like, too bad. Here it is. So, and the idea too, going back to this discovery of herself, of like being open about her sexuality and embracing it, and even very much celebrating it on this song. Like, this song is so goofy and funny, but it's also very sincere, and like, this is what she wants, and this is what she's gonna do. And I could just go on and on about this one. As the songwriter, there's so much in it here. The line that I love the most, just because of how she sings it and also just how mathematically perfect it is when she says, "I think you were made for me. Somebody write down the recipe." That's just such great songwriting, just how that all lines up so perfectly on those lines. And the line that makes me laugh the most, though, is just in the line of the chorus, "I could buy her so much stuff." I just love that. Like, what kind of stuff? Just stuff. Like, what do you want? I'm just gonna get her everything she wants. Like, it's such a fun song. And again, whenever I'd go in to listen to this record, I just get caught in a loop on this song. Like, as the guy who's more of a single songs guy than a full album guy, this is just the easy standout for me. This is the one that I will be returning to all year long.
See, that is interesting because I feel similarly in the sense that, like, this song is going to have so much replayability to it, but I don't know if I identified my top 5 on the album, if this would even be there.
Interesting.
Which I'll get into why that is when we get into later songs. I just love some of the later songs just so much more for various other reasons. But a couple of things you pointed out there, I mean, even with all these production tricks and these pop things, like you said, it does feel really live. And for all I know, the drums could be MIDI, but based on the other songs on the album, this was a drummer playing it live in a room, and you can hear that. I feel like it adds so much to a lot of these songs, and it's pretty rare nowadays that on just a mainstream pop record that you're going to get that. And so I really appreciated that. And then at the AMC thing, they played a little bit of the Zane Lowe Apple Music interview, and Billie was saying that for this song they just wanted to have fun, so that on the moments on the album where it is more serious, it feels a lot more impactful, because it's like, if you're just sad all the time, if you're just like emotional and all the time, then is it really gonna hit the same? So I think to have this super fun song, especially following Skinny, there's such a strong contrast between those two songs. Like, they couldn't be more different. And I think it's all the better for that.
What's also interesting about the pairing of Skinny and Lunch is that if you're kind of a casual Billie Eilish fan, like, you can head out now. You've got Ballad Billie and you've got Bop Billie. Like, those are the two things that she's known for. And if that's all, if that's what you're here for, if you're looking for like the two like singles kind of from the record, That's it right there. And people have said that this record feels to them like slowly getting deeper and deeper in a pool or in an ocean. Like you're just getting darker and darker and deeper the further in you go. And I think that like this is kind of the intro. This is like for me, I think of it more of as exhibits in an aquarium, to stick with the water theme that's so prevalent on this record. Like this is kind of like, Skinny is like you're walking in and you've got all these options you could go down. Lunch is like this is gonna sound silly when I say it, but this is like the petting zoo exhibit of the aquarium, where you're kind of like, oh, I don't know if I should do this. Like, look at all these fish here. I don't know if I want to touch them. And then you do it. It's like, oh wow, that's so cool. And like you get this excitement of doing something new and like getting into it there. That's what this one feels like to me. And then as we go on, I have different visions in my mind of each song as an aquarium. I found that to be a very helpful way to examine this record, as thinking of it not as like getting deeper in a pool, but like I'm in an aquarium and I'm going and seeing different exhibits in an aquarium on each song.
Fascinating.
This is how I listen to records. I've got to have... See, that's the thing. Like, you had the AMC thing, so you got to see all the visuals that she had, like, picked for this.
Right.
I have to make up my own visuals for this. So this is where we're at.
That's fair. That's fair. Petting zoo.
Yeah.
I did not see that at AMC.
Yeah, just like it's the interactive thing. It's the fun, like, it's the fun thing.
Right,
it's like,
right.
oh, everybody's here. We're all doing this fun thing. And that's like the pop singles. So...
Yeah, I mean, we go from this what is going to be a huge single no matter what. I mean, I even looked at the streams on the album already, and it's like, obviously this is the one. This is the one with the music video.
Music video is fun too. Was that part of the AMC thing, or was that a different clip entirely?
No. So like during the AMC thing, they just had an album cover animation and lyrics on top, so you really couldn't distinguish between songs like visually. Okay. It was very much like put the music first. I was expecting for each song there to be like a different visual. I thought
that was what they were going with too. I'm surprised to hear that.
My prediction for why that is, I mean, maybe it's just a time thing or they didn't want to do it, but I think that, like you said, this is meant to be consumed as a whole piece, encapsulated in just one core theme. So that could be why it's just all put the album cover on there, and it's her sinking down in this water. And like you said, I feel like we're barely sinking down now.
Right. We're nowhere
really
near the bottom at this point. No.
Yeah. That was interesting to me, but and the music video is just fun.
It is.
I love that it's just like an early 2000s or like 90s-esque thing. Remind me of like All Star.
Yeah, that's exactly what she's going for. Yeah.
Yeah. But the next song on the record, I think there were also like snippets of this.
Yes, there was.
CHIHIRO. I hope I'm saying that right. I have no idea. Do you think it's CHIHIRO?
I think it is. Now, here's the thing. So do you know anything about Spirited Away?
I wish I did, because it's one of the most praised just movies in general, and it's been on my watch list for the longest time. And as soon as I saw that this was the song title was based on that, I'm like, dang it,
yes, if we do this. This was always a thing of embarrassment for me, because we got our start or first found our audience as a band writing songs about Western animation and cartoons, but anime is something that I have never dipped a toe in, and every time I even think about doing it, I just get so overwhelmed. Like it's this huge culture unto itself. So when I look at the lyrics of this song and I see people going, "Oh, well, this could be a reference to this part of the film or that part of the film," I'm like, "Well, that's not going to help me because I've never seen the film." So this one to me, I'm really curious to know what you think about this one, because this one to me is one that I have listened to a lot, and I just every time I hear it, I feel like I'm missing something. Like it's something that I can't quite key into with this one. What do you think about something?
This one? I love this one. I think that on my first listen, I maybe felt that it overstayed its welcome a little bit. But as I continue to listen to it and the way that it segues into the big synths at the end, to me, it's really one of the only songs on the album to me that's you could honestly just like vibe out for a couple minutes, and it's not demanding your attention necessarily the entire time. But I think the reason why it sticks out to me, the production from Phineas, like I will never get over it. Like just the bass is cranked on this thing. Like it is the
very
song
much.
pretty much. And I think I could just listen to that for like 10 hours. And so I wouldn't say I would pull this out of my favorites in any way. I'm a little surprised to see so many people identifying this as like one of their top contenders. But still, to me, now that I'm listening to the whole album, I'm like, I have no problem with this being 5 minutes.
I mean, it's very much Phineas's song. Like this is the kind of production that he really shines on. It's very low key, but it's very textured. Like especially what he's doing with her vocals. Like there's so many just background vocals that are buried in here that are either super hard panned or just very reverbed out or just little things that he's adding to the vocals to fill it out. There's a phrase that she says in the first verse. I think she says kind of strange. And he puts this little distortion on that to like highlight, oh, something strange is going on here. And that's the kind of thing that he does with all this stuff. He just knows how to fill space so effectively without cramming it full of a bunch of different things, just little adjustments that are made throughout. You mentioned the bass being the real driving part of this song, and I thought it was really interesting that there's such a contrast between the bass and the really muffled drums and these big, bright synths that just those big synth arpeggios that go throughout. And it really feels to me like this is the first song on the record that really feels like underwater. And there's a lot of songs that'll feel like this later on. But that idea of like sound being muffled, but like sunlight still filtering in, and you seeing this bright refraction in the water, that's what it sounds like to me when you're seeing it. It's like visually that's what I can see. To go to my aquarium experiment, this feels to me like you're in one of those like plexiglass tunnels and like there's water and like animals are swimming all around you, and you kind of are really immersed in that environment. And that's what this one feels like to me.
I also think that for this song, later in the album, she repeats this lyric multiple times on other songs, but "Open Up the Door," which is obviously, I think, the whole inspiration behind the album cover.
Yes.
And like you said, it probably is one of the most like underwater feeling things. And this is actually, just as a tangent, this is one of my favorite album artworks in a while, actually, just in general.
It's very arresting when you see that. It is just like,
like as soon as I saw that, I was like, I really hope the album's good because I love the cover. Again, I wouldn't say that as a song I'm like super in love with it, but I could listen to this like 15 more times and pick out new production things every single time, which I think just automatically gives it still some replayability, even if like I won't be just independently like jamming the song like I would a lunch or something like that.
One other thing I think we have to talk about on this one is her vocals on the chorus. Like I've never heard her sing like that. Like the closest she's come is on some of the higher notes on like a When the Party's Over or something like that. But like this is a completely different sounding range for her, just way up there in that head voice.
Yeah.
And when I first heard it, I was like, again, just wow, she's so good.
Yeah.
She is so good at singing. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And there's barely any effect on it too. I'm sure that they did that pretty much perfectly raw and just stacked the vocals as it was. It just that she has that much control in that tone and in that register is just unbelievable. She sounds so great on that.
Well, yeah, like throughout pretty much her entire discography, I'd say if you really just like sit down and listen to it, every single vocal is so stacked. I mean, there's like layers on layers on layers that like, would another producer even bother with that? Maybe not. Or would another singer feel the need to do that? Maybe not. And I think that helps separate her, even if it is this subconscious thing that most people aren't even thinking of when they're listening to it. I think for the production to be as layered as it is, it makes sense that her vocals are stacked in the way that they are. So, yeah, anything else on this song?
I want to turn to the door, which comes up a lot in the record. I think what's also interesting about it is that when she says open up the door, it's like she's looking for something for new, like she wants to go deeper. But I think the idea with the album cover of like opening up the door and immediately finding yourself like submerged is a really interesting concept too. Of like when you open up that door, like what are you going to find on the other side? Like you might find a new discovery, or you might find yourself in trouble. And I think that's a big theme of this record too, of like the deeper you go into examining yourself, the more you might not like what you find. And when we get to something like Bittersweet and Blue at the end here, I think that's a big theme that comes back.
Yeah. And I think that opening up a new door is generally seen as like this positive thing of new opportunities and this sort of thing. And this is like, I opened up the door and I started drowning.
Right, exactly.
So obviously is a direct contrast to what you would probably expect. So then right after that, obviously we have Birds of a Feather.
I don't know what I'm crying for. I don't think
I'm very curious to get your thoughts on this one. I love this song.
Interesting. Okay.
It is easily in my top 5. That's
okay. That's really cool. I don't know. So when I first heard it, my first thought was, this sounds like a Maggie Rogers song.
if you keep reaching out, then I'll keep coming back. But if you're gone,
Do you know Maggie Rogers?
Yes.
This felt to me so much like that kind of sort of adult alternative, Maggie Rogers, Caroline Polachek, like that kind of vibe to it. This song sounds phenomenal. I love the production choices. I also love how this feels like a different kind of vocal performance for her. It's a different kind of timbre to her voice. The way that she says like, what's the line? Light in my eyes. There's one line where she just really leans into it. It sounds so cool. It's a very different register for her. And that would really jumped out to me at first. This really feels like she's experimenting with a different style, and it's working very well for her voice.
I first heard maybe like 5-10 seconds of this song. It was in some Netflix trailer.
That's right. Yeah.
I don't remember what show or movie it was, but
Heartstopper.
Yes. And I think that is so fitting because if any song could be put on any soundtrack, this is it. To me, this just sounds like a movie soundtrack song.
Very much so.
Very kind of nostalgic. A lot of people, when they first heard that snippet, were like, this doesn't even sound like Billie Eilish. Because like you said, vocally, like you could be fooled into thinking it's someone else, especially on the choruses. But I think the biggest thing for me is it just feels so light and pure. And the synths are, I'm in love with it. Like I think it's towards the end of the song when that one little synth line comes in. That is just so much fun. As far as like songs I would go back to independently if I wasn't listening to the whole album, this would be almost at the top of my list for me personally.
The one thing that I wish was different about it is as the pop songwriter, I wish there was more repetition in it. Like it's one very kind of very linear thought, and it rarely ever like goes back to a previous section. Like you would think that birds of a feather, we should fly together. Like you would think that would come back, throughout the song, but it really only does like once. And it's just like, I wish this had more of a traditional structure to it because it feels like such a classic pop song to me that I wish they had done it like that. But I get that she doesn't want to do that on this record. She wants it to be, not focused on, being commercially appealing or something like that. And I think the song obviously fits perfectly what it's doing without needing that. But as someone who, again, is really into the pop songwriting aspect of all this, I wish they had done a little bit more traditional stuff with this, because I think it could really be a great single if it had more of that traditional repetition and structure to it.
See, it's funny you say that because I think that's one of the things I like about it, because I like that I only have certain, there's not this repetition, so only these these certain sections, like you mentioned, only pop up once, to me that just makes me want to replay the whole song again and just hear like that specific part. It's funny when, you know, a lot of times when you'll frame things, you know, you are thinking about it in terms of a songwriting perspective, and especially pop songwriting. And for me, and this definitely is the case for the rest of this album, the further we stray from traditional structure, the more I love it. Like the more out there that this gets, the more like, let's just stop the song basically and just start a new one in the middle of a song, the more I'm like totally on board with that. So
cool.
This being like, and so in comparison, this to me is like a pretty simple like pop song in comparison to where this album goes.
Absolutely. I mean, certainly compared to where we're going,
in terms of structure,
this is still a very much a recognizable pop song. I just selfishly wish that it was even more pop, because I mean, it sounds great. My favorite production thing in it is how there are these synth bells that kind of started off and then they turn into a guitar melody like later on in the song. That's a really great touch. That was my favorite production moment in this one. Also, I love it. I think that I can't tell how they made these. I can't tell if this is like a synth or if this is altered vocal snippets, but there's like a little flute sound that comes in later on in the record too. I think that was the synth line you were talking about earlier.
Yeah,
and that's a really neat sound too. Like I'm not sure how they did that. That was a great effect though. My aquarium metaphor. I need to tell you what I was thinking of this one. Please. This is snorkeling in a coral reef with your crush.
I love it.
It's like we've got a coral exhibit and you're with someone that you're kind of crushing on and you're like under there and it's all colorful and you're seeing all this stuff floating around. Like I know the song's called Birds of a Feather, but like I don't get a lot of like woodsy vibes off of this. I get a lot of like shallow water on the beach. We're having a good time. That kind of thing.
See, I see that, but also the like sort of airiness and lightness that I talk about feels a bit like you're like that song just soars, and I think that kind of feels Birds of a Feather-esque.
Okay.
So that's how I see it. But yeah, I love that song. I can see myself replaying it a bunch. But then if you don't have anything left on that,
we can go to Wildflower.
Wildflower.
But I see her in the back of my mind.
Thoughts on this?
The first time I heard it, I was a little disappointed because the songs this far have been very production heavy with a lot of like texture and a lot of little tricks going on to kind of catch my ear. This one is very straightforward. And I think the first time I heard it, I was really listening for the production stuff. But the second time around, I was listening to the lyrics. And when I was going through and kind of looking at that, I think this is one of the most interesting lyrical songs on the record.
It's funny because when I was hearing this album for the first time, I would say around Wildflower, maybe the greatest, this is when I started to feel like, as much as I loved the last 4 songs, this is when I felt like it's on another level.
Okay.
And I think that's mainly because Wildflower is definitely, I'd say, the most traditional, like you said, production-wise. There's not all these fancy pop tricks or anything like that. But again, the drums on this, like the super light approach, like it could be played with brushes or something, is perfect to me. And I think it really matches just how raw the vocals are. Like you can really hear in this song and a lot of songs on this album, and I could say this about other things in her catalog, but you can hear every breath. Like they don't take anything out. It very much sounds like she could be like, I don't know, right next to you, talking in your ear or something. And I think that it's better off for the fact that it is a little more subdued in the production. I think if it were clouded by all these other things, I think it would take away from this moment. And I think it's a nice sort of... I really see this album in halves, and I see this as the close to the first half, because the second half to me is like, you know, it just goes all out. It's not... There's really no more singles left or anything close to that. There's, you know, this is when we get into the, after Wildflower, it's really when we get into the experimentation of the record. So I see this as a perfect dividing point.
I think this is interesting that you talk about this as like the closing of the first half and like the first kind of a moving on of something, because one of the lines in the song is, "Did I cross the line?" I do want to focus on the lyrics here because they are very complex, I think, of just like what's going on here. And the song that this is kind of the mirror image to is "Obsessed," the new single by Olivia Rodrigo. You know, that song is about Olivia, you know, knowing that her current partner, this ex that he had, and she's always wondering, like, how do I compare to this ex? And you know, she does this very Broadway, it's very, you know, theater style, it's very big, and that's what she does best. But Billie takes a more subdued approach, as you would expect Billie to do. And I think it's interesting that not only is she always thinking about, you know, this ex and like the impact that she had on this partner's life, but she also knows this ex and is friends with this ex, and even is suggested that like she consoled this ex when they broke up in the first place, and to now be with this guy, with this partner, it's a very complex situation, and her kind of thinking about like, what does that mean for me? What does that mean for us going forward? Like, you know, does he still think about her? How do I compare to her? There's a lot going on there.
And I think it's one of the first times where, again, I think because the song structure and the instrumentation, because it gives that room to breathe, it's the first time when I was listening in the theater with the lyrics on screen and that sort of thing, where that was the main thing I could focus on. Outside of the things that obviously I'm going to be honest, anytime I hear any song, the first thing I'm going to pay attention to is the drums.
Well, of course, yeah.
So outside of that, I think that it's just super poignant, and even if it's not necessarily something I can relate to, I think that applies to a lot of this album. I can still appreciate the just level of honesty and the complexity of these feelings. It's not these like... this is this way, this is that way. It's not in black and white, which it's blue.
We'll get to that later. Yep.
Yeah, I think I wonder how this album is going to shake up for casual listeners, because again, I see this as this dividing point. I can still see this song having, you know, pretty wide appeal, and when you get into these more experimental 5, almost 6-minute songs, that's when I could see like maybe some casual, just mainstream listeners that are, you know, I got nothing against that, but if they just know Bad Guy or
When the Party's Over, or Therefore I Am, or even What Was I Made For? Yeah.
But I think this is just sort of a tangent. I think something that I really appreciate about this album in general is that I think listeners, especially people that just like pop music and that sort of thing, are really more so now than ever appreciating an album.
Sure.
And sure, everything is always going to be single driven. But again, when I was in this theater and there were 300 plus people and they were so excited about these deep cuts and these interesting moments, it's like, I think it's unfair to even label just Billie Eilish as this pop singer or whatever, because I think that writes off a lot of the like true dedication and craftsmanship, where I think it's nice to see the shift of this album culture. And I don't know if you feel that way.
I think that there is, you know, it's interesting. This is something we haven't talked about yet, but I feel like there are extremes. And this is something that Billie also talked about in the record, of hit me hard and soft being this extreme.
Yeah.
She wants it both ways. I think there are a lot of listeners who also kind of want it both ways. I think myself included. Like I want a record that feels cohesive front to back, but I also want to be able to go in there and pick out like, oh yeah, that song is great. That song is great. And it's interesting to me that it feels like as culture gets faster and faster and faster and faster. And that was something that Phineas even said in an interview, is that we've moved on from just being like one song that people like. No, they like 15 seconds of that song that's gone viral on TikTok.
Yeah.
But then there's this other side of like, okay, no, we want a full record. And I think that there are two, very different camps in that respect. That one that wants to just kind of be like on top of everything and always move, into one that really wants to sit and have time with the things that they like. And I think either way is certainly a valid way of consuming music, but I think there are moments on this record that work for either camp.
Definitely. Yeah. I thought it was funny on the Lunch music video, someone commented like, I'm so glad this is longer than 2 minutes. It's just so funny that, it's becoming more normal to have these 1 minute, 45-second songs that are written with the intent of TikTok and all these things in mind, which, we even ourselves have
We're definitely guilty of that. Like we certainly
made
think
shorter
about
songs
that,
and that sort of thing. And so I don't think it's a bad thing, but I think it's very intentional that they didn't do that, obviously. Because when you think of a 10-song album, I think like maybe 33, 35 minutes.
Yeah, and this is like 45 minutes.
Yeah. This seems to be a common trend that people always assume there's like a double album.
Oh yeah, of course. We'll get to that. We'll get to that in Blue when we get to the last line too. Yeah,
but it's just funny to me because it's like, if you hear this and you don't hear like the time that this would take,
absolutely,
it's like if there were another album, I would be astounded because like you can't make something like this in like a couple months or something. Like this very clearly, like these songs were a lot of work. Like there's no way that each song didn't have a million revisions and all these sorts of things. And it's like to expect more
immediately.
Just because you're like, oh, it's only 10 songs. It's just, I don't know. To me, it's a little ridiculous, but
and I think you and I can hear that because, as musicians, we know how long this takes and how much work every single sound on a song takes to get right. So, yeah.
And, we've made things very quickly, and it's like, if we wanted, we could have probably spent a year on those things, and they would have been, totally different and probably had different layers in them and all these different things. But in our case, it was just like, let's get this out, whatever. I think that helped us in a lot of cases just to not overthink it, because I can imagine holding on to things for this long. And, they mentioned in the Apple Music interview that they would, as soon as they started to feel like they were getting in the groove of something and about to finish a song, they would stop and move on to the next one, because they didn't want to feel like, oh, this one's done, let's move on to the next one. They wanted it to feel like we are making a whole thing. So
that's a great point. That's a great idea.
Yeah. So then let's stop here, come back to this theme, maybe even later, that we were thinking of putting in this song. Let's put it over here. And I think that's so obvious because this is very much an album, which I'll harp on a lot. But
I want to say two more things about Wildflower really quick. My aquarium scene for this one. You're in like a dark room. You got like a big ceiling to floor like glass wall. You got like a big tank behind you full of all these things, but you're alone in the room, and you're just sitting there kind of watching. You feel kind of uneasy, like I shouldn't be alone in here. Kind of thing like that. That was the vibe I got off of this one. Other question to keep in with the in-universe of the album. Is this X, the girl in the song, the other girl, is she the girl Billy could eat for lunch?
When I was hearing the album for the first time and even after, I feel like this is all about very few people, a very few select people. Like I think there's no way that, I don't know if it's hard to say specifically whether this is
I mostly am joking, but at the same time I was just like, wait a minute, is this the girl that Billy's gonna be inviting over to her hotel suite in lunch?
If that is the case, I don't know, adds
that's a layer,
new context to both songs, but yeah. Anything else?
No, that's all. We could go on to the greatest.
Am I the greatest? My congratulations.
I'm dying to talk about this one.
Okay, go. You start. You start. Yeah.
The greatest to me is the best song Billie Eilish has ever made.
To go for the obvious pun.
I'm trying to avoid saying the
it's
greatest.
the greatest.
I'm sorry.
It's the greatest. Yeah.
I knew that the first time I heard it. I think that it is a much better version of what she did on Happier Than Ever with the big climactic finish. Everything, there's not a single detail that I would change about this song. And as far as which one I've been playing the most, I am playing this one the most. Like when I was driving last night, I just had this song going the whole time. And when she finally like belts out and it gets into that section, it's like, again, this is the start of the second half of the album. This is not it's not Lunch, it's not Birds of a Feather, it's nothing like that. This is you going into the deep end. Like this is finally sinking down into it. And it's the start of what I would say is half of the record that I very much prefer.
Okay.
It's hard to even say that because I love the first half. Like I really haven't said anything negative up until this point, which I'm realizing.
There's nothing wrong with that.
To me, this is the best she's ever sounded. The drums are, again, you can hear the room that they were
you really
recording
can.
in.
Yeah, these are definitely live drums.
And it just makes me envious. I'm like, I want a sound like that. Like I want it to feel like it's you're live in a room. The drum kit is like a little bit overblown, not too much. Like Happier Than Ever was very much like distorted and that sort of thing, which I think kind of took away from that moment personally. But yeah, I think this song's perfect. I love that it feels very ethereal, but then moves to this sort of bombastic thing. Because I feel this way, I am curious, especially how you feel based on what you said of the previous songs.
So to go back to something you said before, I must confess, I never liked Happier Than Ever, the song.
Okay.
I never liked it. And because it felt like they were going for this rock sound that for me as a guitarist and as a producer, I was like, you didn't quite get it right. Like it was just a little too muddy. It was too overcompressed. It wasn't that big crescendo did not hit for me on Happier Than Ever the way that I know it hit for so many other people. I never liked that song. This is exactly like you said. This is that crescendo done perfectly right. Just no notes on that crescendo. It is perfectly executed. Longer songs do tend to take a lot out of me, so I don't know that I would return to this one a lot. But
that's crazy.
I do think that it's hugely dynamic, and the thing I love most about it is how I'll start with my kind of aquarium scene metaphor. This feels like less of an aquarium scene and more like an exhibit on shipwrecks to me, where you start with this like nylon string guitar. It sounds very kind of ocean seaside vibe, and then when that big wall of guitars and drums and strings hit, it's like a big storm coming through and like sinking all the ships kind of thing. And this is a song that's very much like about like this release of anger and frustration that like she put all this work into this relationship and she felt nothing out of it. The other person didn't reciprocate it. And the way she kind of builds up that chorus of just like all my love and patience unappreciated, that's such a great couplet to me. I love that line in particular. But I love how it also builds in the second verse. The build on that part from a production standpoint is so fascinating to me because like the first like verse and chorus are all just her and a guitar. Like all these stacks of vocals as you would expect, and just like I think two guitars panned left and right, and that's all you're working with, but it feels full. And then as they build it up more and more, you get those drums coming in. There's like a triplet guitar part that kind of comes in and clashes in very fascinating ways with the first guitar part. I really love how that sounds. It's played on the same instrument, you can tell, but the way those two parts work together is very fascinating. And then when you get to that big crescendo and you kind of slide into the new key and you're into a different meter too. Like you're the drummer. What meter is this in? Because I've been trying to figure this out. Like it's I feel like
it's funny
It's like a split meter because it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2.
Yeah, it's funny because, you know, I mentioned I love the sound of the drums on this one. It's funny how little I thought of technical aspects, like, you know, you're picking out specific guitar moments and that sort of thing. I think we were talking the other night on the phone about songs that have made us cry, and I was saying it takes a lot for I can't think of really many songs at all that have ever made me cry or feel or that emotive or anything. This song, even when I'm talking about it, like when I'm explaining it, gives me chills. Wow. And like when I was and I think the reason for that is, again, that first experience I had with it when everybody was in the room together and the sort of the air was sucked out of the room when it finally,
I imagine,
you know,
so.
she's belting, yeah. Am I the greatest? And there's just that huge release and these speakers are blasting all this stuff. Like that was like a religious experience. Like that was one of the most memorable spots of an album and just a time listening I've honestly ever had in my life. I'm not like over exaggerating. Again, I have bias from that perspective. Maybe I would feel differently if I was just listening independently, but I'm so glad that there's so many moments like this on this album, just like things that go all out, because it just lent itself to a crowd reacting to it.
I can certainly imagine that seeing it not only with that many people, but in that kind of surround sound where it's just coming at you. I imagine that was crazy.
And it felt the closest to like seeing something live and there's just like this incredible moment that happens. But even then it's like with concerts, I kind of get sucked out of that sometimes because, you know, people are screaming every word and it's just, everything is so high energy and up there, where this one, it's like I could hear people tearing up at the start of the song and by the end of it, people were clapping like crazy. And I think to have that dynamic range in this, there's no way this wouldn't be my favorite song. So do I have some bias? Sure. But I don't care. No,
that's cool. I mean, I love that you got to have that experience with it.
Yeah.
Like that's very special. Yeah.
And yeah, this I guess I have this prop, the ticket from said
event.
Nice.
Nice.
Thanks for 3 months of Apple.
Right.
But yeah, anything else on this? I mean, I really can't.
No, I think we have much left to say about that one. Let's go on to L'Amour.
I wish you the best for the rest of your life. Felt sorry.
Go ahead and start with this.
So L'Amour. I'm not a huge fan of this one.
No.
I just think, to me, like I appreciate kind of like the inventiveness of it, of going from this very like relaxed lounge thing to like, oh, now we're in the club and we got the hyper pop vocal effect going on here. For me though, I just felt like it added up to a little less than the sum of its parts. That's just me.
Okay, that's fair enough. I will say this. It is one of the biggest like turnarounds I've had on a song in a long time.
Okay.
Just because when I heard this song for the first time, I didn't know that the second half was still a part of this same
Right.
And I thought it was, but I'm like, well, maybe that transition where it like speeds up and the vocals are pitched and then it goes to the clubby type thing. I was like, maybe that's the start of the diner or something. Like I had no idea. And now that I've listened to the album many times and I understand that this is the one thing that it is, I can totally see, like, it makes perfect sense to me why this wouldn't be one of your favorites. Like, I think it's a bit of a mess. I will say though, this is going to sound very contradictory. It is my second favorite on the album. I think the greatest, and this song paired together is the best like 2-song back-to-back combo I've heard in a very long time.
They do work well together. Like going from her being really frustrated about the ending of this relationship to being like, you know what, forget it. I never really liked you anyways. You know, that kind of vibe.
And as soon as I heard this sort of like sarcastic, like you say, lounge, very old school, like you could even say like Sinatra-esque, whatever. As soon as I heard that, I'm like, this song's fire. And specifically, when those drums kick in, it's not like it's this huge thing or anything, but that is the most surprised I've been, besides maybe the greatest, like by a drum part, just because the way it comes in, I thought the song was going to stay pretty subdued. Sure. And then when it does that, it just adds so much life to it. It's so funny that I literally see like every single flaw that I should have with it. Like, because when I first heard this section, you know, with this auto-tune, like you said, hyperpop thing, I was like, eh. And now that I hear it again, I'm like, specifically when it gets into that section with these like dark synths and these really dark, like low frequency drums, like it sounds like it could be playing in another room or something.
And I'll say this, like, I don't have any problem with the two parts. Like, I think she sounds fine doing the hyperpop thing. Like, it works perfectly well. I think my thing is, like, I don't know that putting these two sections together necessarily adds anything to either one of them. It's like,
I totally agree. As a song, the fact that it's one song doesn't make any sense. Like, I think you could have easily cut this in two and just called that part, like, even if you called it like a part two or something, I feel like it would, I don't know, but it's so separate from the first half that it's like, it doesn't even feel like the same thing. So while I acknowledge that, no, I'm glad you like it.
Like, it's an ambitious track, if nothing else. It is very ambitious.
Definitely. When I heard the like auto-tune thing for the first time and people seemed so surprised by it and all this sort of stuff, everybody seemed kind of, I mean, it was hard to tell, but everybody seemed kind of put off by it. But then by the time it ended, it was like, oh, well, that was cool. Like, that was like, it's one of the biggest trips that this
It is very off in a different realm. But, you know, it proves that, like, again, you know, she could do that sound if she wanted. Like, she absolutely could do a full song like that. I think that actually might be what I really want. It's like, all right, if you want to go down that route, like, let's, like, you know, do a song like that. Like, not just this little, you know, minute and a half outro on this guy. Like, let's hear a full song like that. So that's just me. But no, I'm glad that one worked for you.
Yeah, it's funny that, like, when I think of the first half now, this feels so far removed.
Yeah.
While still feeling like this is a cohesive thing. Like, to me, these all fit together, especially like lyrically, because there's callbacks in certain places. But it's easily like if you played Lunch and then you played like the second half of the song, I don't think you would think that it's a part of the same.
Right. I think the interesting thing that your experience was, because, you know, when you were in the theater, like, did you know when a song was ending and you were going to another one?
Not at all.
That's interesting.
So, like, it was just 45 minutes straight. So, like, when I listen to the album now, I'm trying not to even look at what song I'm on. I mean, it's obvious to me now, but I just take it as like a 45-minute thing.
See, I think doing it like that too is interesting, because, like, you would not know that this song is part of it. And also when you get to like Bittersweet and Blue, like, where's the break between those two songs? If you don't have it in there, they mean it sounds like one 11-minute track. Yeah,
especially once there's like the synth melody that ends Bittersweet and then it goes into
the same
Blue.
melody.
I'm like, I knew I had heard that melody before because True Blue had leaked in like 2022, and then I was like, and people were flipping out in the theater that they knew the melody, which I thought was fun. But I'm like, okay, now we're on Blue, and now I listen to it, and I'm on Spotify. I'm like, oh,
we're still in Bittersweet.
Started that song. Yeah, it's very untraditional in that way. Like, I have not experienced many albums where it's like, you could literally just call this like one 45-minute thing, and it would just, that's how it is. But anything left on this one?
My aquarium scene with this one, you're in like
I keep forgetting your aquarium. It's a crime.
My aquarium scene for this one is that you're in like a low tide exhibit with like hermit crabs and stuff, you know, for the lounge part. And then when the disco thing happens, when the club thing happens, like a little disco ball comes out of the ceiling and the crabs do a little choreographed dance number. Yeah, it's like in my notes I said a dolphin show but with crabs. Like hermit crabs.
Thank you for clarifying that. I can't believe you wrote that down.
I did. Now, we've been talking a lot about Bittersweet and Blue, but before we get there, we got to go through the diner.
You could be my wife.
This one's
Yes,
very
we
interesting to
did.
me. What are your thoughts on the diner?
So to me, I think it may be the percussion why I feel this way. To me, this feels the most reminiscent of some songs on Happier Than
Okay,
Ever.
yes, I would agree.
And I feel like it could be plucked from that because it is it's super like dark and like has that like gritty electronic thing going on. Not in the same way that there's the darkness in When We All Fall Asleep, but I know there's definitely a couple songs I can't think of off the top of my head on Happier Than Ever that sonically are pretty similar. When I heard this one for the first time, I remember thinking like, wow, the vocals are mixed kind of quiet. And the more that I listened to it, I thought maybe that was just because of the Dolby Atmos thing or something else. But that definitely just is intentional. I would say if I could pick, it's crazy because I feel like even saying this, I feel wrong even saying it, but if I could pick a least favorite, this is probably mine. But I also feel like I absolutely need this song. Like I need it to be on here, and I need it to be after L'Amour and in between that and Bittersweet. So I'm kind of conflicted on this one because I definitely wouldn't identify it as like a favorite or one I would go back to independently. But I think in the context of the album, again, I feel like I need it here. I feel like with listening to it 5 times and understanding that, you know, the mix is intentional that way, it helps me sort of grasp it a little more. Whereas before it seemed like kind of a mistake. Which I knew that probably wasn't the case just because they're not going to, you know, do that. But I think production-wise, there's these, like, pitch-shifted things that are super interesting. Like, I think this is another song that Phineas is just, like, doing his thing. You could have somebody produce this song, you know, more traditionally or something, and it would be an entirely different because of Phineas, it's just like super eccentric and wild. But yeah, that's how I feel. I'm
This one is probably my favorite sounding song on the record.
Oh, wow.
I love it. There's so many little things. I love the string sample. Like they might not even be a sample, but they make it sound like one. Like they put this kind of like vinyl effect on it that makes it sound like it was pulled from something else. I love that there's this like eighth note synth in there that sounds like it's laughing at me. And it's like it is so I don't know how they did that. That is my favorite synth sound on the album. I love how that sounds. And I love when the big swamping bass comes in. That sounds really cool. The thing is with this, I think the muffled vocal is a detriment. Because when I had no idea what she was saying until I looked up the lyrics to this one. And when you look up the lyrics, this song is insane. Like this character is insane. And when you think about what she was saying in a lot of these interviews about how she felt like she couldn't go outside, like she was afraid to like, you know, go and interact in like society. And it's like, yeah, if I had people like this who were stalking me, I wouldn't go outside either. Like, you know, like again, like I didn't hear this the first time I listened to it. I had to look up the lyrics, but like the final verse of I memorized your number. Now I call you when I please. I tried to end it all, but now I'm back up on my feet. I saw you in the car with someone else and couldn't sleep. If anything happens to him, you can bet that it was me. Like, oh, jeez. Holy cow.
Yeah.
But I feel like the song would have had more menace to it if it was a more clean vocal line, because like I think they're trying to make it sound like this guy's like, you know, kind of woozy or he's drunk or he's not like thinking straight with like how the vocals are processed. But if it was more like clean and focused and precise, I think it would sound a lot creepier and a lot more like a villain song, which is what they're going for here. And I wish they could kind of allowed it to be that way. But sonically, I adore how this song sounds. I love the production. I love the different synth choices. It really is actually one of my favorites on the record.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, it's funny too because, like you said, when you heard it for the first time, you couldn't even tell what she was saying. Obviously, I had the lyrics.
You did,
right in
yes,
front
you
of me,
had
so
the
it was,
lyrics.
It was
yeah.
weird. It was weird though because I was like, I feel like I should be hearing these more. Like I should be like, shouldn't this be? Because it's super washed out.
It is.
too. Like
Yes.
it's
So much.
just, like,
There's a lot of
soaked in
reverb on it, filters on it. Yeah.
And like you said, it could be like, it's in his head or something. But like you said, I feel like if it was more direct and kind of creepy and almost had this like, the villain is right in front of you, or even if it is in your head, it's like super close by. I think that could be more interesting. Yeah, I mean that is probably the only gripe I would have with it too. But what I love at the end of this song, because it's very much what I just said, there's these. The outro is just like these little whispers. I don't remember what she says.
Oh, it's a phone number. It's a phone number, and if you call the phone number, you get like a recorded message from Billie.
Oh yeah. Because I forgot that the phone number was on screen and people were like,
we gotta get their phones out, dialing the number.
But it has such like an atmospheric end to it, and I think even just the name of like the diner just makes it feel like I feel like you can visualize this song more than any other one.
Yes, it's very much a character piece too. Like it feels like it's part of like a play, and like I should be seeing like some set pieces on stage, like moving around. Yeah. My aquarium scene for this one, it's like the Mariana Trench, like all the weird angler fishes, like, going by the screen. You're like, whoa, that's creepy. That was my aquarium scene for the diner.
It's hard for me to hear Mariana's Trench without
thinking of Mariana's Trench. Yes.
Side note, shout out. But bittersweet. Which we've sort of touched on a little bit before.
Yeah, I feel like we've almost already talked about both this one and
my
Blue.
Third favorite.
This is your third favorite? Bittersweet?
This is my third favorite. Again, this is why like the second half is just, to me, leaps and bounds above almost anything else in her discography, because I think that the first half is the most reminiscent easily to When We All Fall Asleep. The sort of whispered vocals, and it's got like this four on the floor thing. It feels very reminiscent to that album. But then obviously it just like a lot of the other songs, it's super dynamic when it does that like tempo slowdown and just again switches into basically an entirely different song. I just love the trip that it takes you on production wise. This is top tier for me. And this was the one I think that I was talking about before with the outro, with the
synth line comes in
like
from
this
Blue.
really bass.
Yeah.
And then like callback wise, I think there's like at least multiple references to other songs, and it happens in Blue too.
I think this is another one where they talk about the door and like she's in the hotel room. So like, is this like kind of it goes back to even lunch? I have to be in a certain mindset when I listen to this one because I can't expect it to be like any kind of pop song. Like this is as far from pop as you can get in terms of structure.
Yeah.
Like this is like three different fragments stitched together. And there's a part of me that doesn't like that just because I would want each of these to be like their own song. This feels very much like an interlude to me, and maybe not its own piece just because it's so slippery. Like, what part of this is bittersweet? Well, it's all bittersweet. It's tough for me to wrap my hands around this one. And I think that is something that kind of holds it back for me. But it's certainly at this point, like you're like, we're in the depths now. This is like, and it is going to be messier because like we're down this far.
So aquarium wise,
I have a story for this one. I literally had to come up with like a plot to explain this one.
Okay.
You're going through like all these different exhibits. Like you go through like a couple different ones, and then you see a door in the wall that says like, do not enter, employees only. But it's cracked open a little bit. And so your curiosity gets the better of you, and you go inside. And you go down these like dingy staircases, and there's like, it's all dark and the lights are flickering, very creepy. You come out and you're in this room with this absolutely enormous tank, and it looks completely empty. It's like dark water all in there. And this is like by the time you get to the end of the song where you get that really bassy synth coming in that's playing the melody from Blue, and you walk up and you realize it's not empty. There's a monster in it. There's like Megalodon or the giant squid or some mosasaur that's like under this aquarium. They're hiding this monster. And I think that that's kind of, it's not a direct comparison, but it's kind of what we're getting at here, because like the whole record's been about like finding, what's deep down. And when we get into Blue here, it's like,
Yeah.
ending the record with Blue and Bittersweet kind of leading right into it. I consider Bittersweet and Blue to be almost the same song. Like they're one long, suite for me.
Yeah.
Ending the record with Blue is fascinating to me because it ends in this place of sadness. Like for her to realize that like all these things that she's criticizing this partner for being like, oh, they're paranoid, they don't want to, do anything, or I can't change the way they are. She's realizing that she can apply that same thing to herself. Like she's also not taking good care of herself. And deep down there is this sadness. And for her to end the record by saying that she's true blue, it's like disarming of her to say like, deep down at the bottom of all this is this sadness that like won't go away. There is this kind of monster at the depths of it all that won't, that is driving all of this record. I mean, that's really impactful to think about, that like, to start this record with like, I gotta go find like, who I am apart from all this stuff outside. And, to again, open up that door and immediately be like, oh, this wasn't what I was expecting down here. Like, there's nothing but water and emptiness down here.
Yeah.
That's, I mean, that's
I think that,
really
it's like
sad,
this, it's like this endlessness of like hopelessness. And I think, like you said, the vastness of like the ocean, just being like stuck at the ocean floor, is how it feels. And it's not how I expected the album to end in any way. I feel like now, I mean, after hearing the whole thing and going back to it many times, I feel like it's only fitting that it comes to this conclusion, because you're like sinking so far down that it's like, what other conclusion can you come to? But I mean, just musically even, for Blue, I think it's so interesting that it does feel like the closest as far as, repetition, and this being sort of like a continuous cycle, because you have this ending with the strings, which is the same way Skinny ended. And it's like, to me, you could...
That's a good point. That's a really good point. Yeah.
And it's like, to me, you could have this on a loop, this album, and it's like, okay, you have that pop up, and then you just sing down more. It's like at the end of Skinny, you start in a sad place as well. And then it's like you just push that aside, and it's lunch, and it's, whatever. It's fun for like a little bit. But then it just gets darker. And I think I naturally find myself gravitating towards this second half, because it does just get deeper into the depths of it and the complexity of like her position in relationships and that sort of thing. And I mentioned this line before, but the not black and white, but it's blue.
Yeah.
That is the most fitting thing of all. Because it's like, you can't put the blame anymore on just this one thing this person did or what this person did. There's not a gray area, but a blue.
It's an interesting thing to kind of toss around in your mind. The lyric from this one that really jumped out to me was, victim of your father's plan to rule the world.
I knew you were going to take that one.
What a fascinating line just to think about. And then for her to kind of turn that around and say like that might apply to her too, that you're part of this environment. Then she did grow up in show business in a way, and to have those resources to pursue music in this way of, did that kind of trap her in a sense in this life. you know, she's that bird in a cage, you know, maybe it was always destined to kind of be that way for her, which is a really disarming thing to think about.
Yeah. Just to sort of like wrap this up, I want to sort of segue this into just the record as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I think that what really is so important and exciting to me about this album is that it feels like such a cut above what almost any artist in her position could do. You know, she could easily put out 10 bangers, you know, have it be like Lunch, have it be whatever, maybe throw in a ballad or something like that. But this is so clearly constructed in mind with like, this is what we wanted to do. And there's no way that the label wasn't like, are you sure you want to like have this weird section in the song or whatever? And I admire the fact that they just go all out and they unleash this creativity. And Phineas was saying in that Apple Music interview that this finally feels like, and you know, artists say this all the time, but this finally feels like the album he wanted to make. Like, it's hard for them to imagine the next thing because this was the thing. Like, this was the thing that they felt they were building towards.
And it is interesting, I think, to imagine, like you said, about imagining the next thing. Like, you do get to that line at the end of like, well, when can I hear the next one?
Yeah.
And it's almost like, you know, sure, you can read that as, oh, there's more on the way, or you could read it as kind of satiric, like, you know, people have gotten to the end of the record, there's like, all right, what's next? Wait, we want more, we want more, we want more. And and I don't want to compare these two artists, but it's interesting to think about this in comparison to Taylor, who is all about volume right now. Just, you know, constantly putting out either re-recordings or double albums or, you know, all this stuff. She is constantly on the grind. And to look at something like this, which might have taken as long to make this as it took Taylor to make Tortured Poets Department, the double album. Yeah. But instead of 30 songs, it's just 10 that all are just designed to fit together in this way, in this one package.
Yeah, and I think it's, I mean, I personally think that the volume thing, the volume of releases and that sort of thing, can be a detriment just because it's so much, and it's like, it's just not very selective, where it's like, I would be perfectly fine if I had to sit with this album and not get a Billie Eilish record until 2028. Like, that's how I feel about it. Because
wow, that's a long time.
That is a long time.
That's 4 years.
That is. But the reason I feel that way is because it's like, I would want the next thing to feel as in depth, and to even imagine that there's like this second thing to it is, again, I could be proven wrong. If this happens, you know. I
know. I was just about to say, now watch her drop something like next week, and we're like, oh well, but she had another one.
I find it very hard to believe, just because of clearly how much time was put into it. I wrote down a phrase or a label I would put this under, which I would call it like a pop opera. And even calling it, even labeling it as pop feels a little like it doesn't cover the span of this. But at its core, I think you could label it as that. But it feels, I mean, it's very clearly this conceptual piece meant to be consumed as a whole. I'm so glad there were no singles ahead of time and that I experienced it in the way that it was intended. And I didn't know what the next song was, whatever that may be. I didn't even know what the songs were called. I mean, I knew like Lunch, and I had remembered some of the titles. Yeah, I mean, I love this thing. I could easily put a rating on it. I don't know if you want to do that.
I don't know that I want to necessarily put a rating on it. I think for me, like, I am very impressed with the scope of it. I think, again, as the way I consume music as like a song by song thing, I can see myself listening to Lunch a million times this year. It is the pop song to beat for me of 2024. And pulling up like a couple of these, like Birds of a Feather or The Diner or The Greatest. I don't know how often I'll return to it as a whole, but I will acknowledge that the only real way to consume this record is as a whole. And to hear the transitions, to hear the way the songs work together, to find all those little elements that you just, every time you hear it, you hear something new. To find as many of those as you can, that's the way to listen to this record.
Yeah, and I feel confident in saying this. I'm not going to put a rating on it just because I feel like that'll hold me to some kind of standard. But what I will say, though, is that when I walked out of the theater and have continued to listen to this, I feel very definitively that this is the best album I'll hear this year.
Wow.
I will be shocked if there's anybody that even comes close to this. I feel like I've never heard, not never heard, but it's rare that I hear so much time and care put into something.
Yeah.
And it's just so abundantly clear. And like you said, as much as I am an album-centric person, I'm going to be replaying certain songs too. Like, it's not like I'm exclusively going to be like, I'm about to do the 45-minute run.
Right.
Like, let's, I'm not going to always be in the mood for that. But I think the fact that that's there and that's an option is amazing. So that's how I feel. I'm curious to know what other people think. I'm seeing,
Absolutely.
Some rave reviews, obviously, but
Yeah, please let us know in the comments. I can't believe I haven't said this yet, but please let us know in the comments what you think of this record. Also, please let us know if there are other records you'd like to hear us talk about. This was the first time that we've done an experiment like this where we sit down and really discuss something, but I really want to get into doing more of this. I feel like you and I we talk so much between ourselves about music all the time that we'd love to share our opinions more, and if you guys want to hear us talk more about records, we would love to do that more.
Yeah. Besides that, check out our new song.
Yeah, we got to plug it a little bit. We do have a new song out. Check it right here. And thank you guys for tuning in and listening to us talk about Billie Eilish here at the discussion table. We hope you pull up a seat with us next time. And until then, peace.